so yesterday I went through all this stuff about plant transport, but I went through the last few slides really, really fast. So I'm going to go through them a little bit slower just to review the xylem and phloem, because those are really, really important in terms of transport of water and nutrients and sugar in plants. I'm just going to quickly go over those again. Okay, things we need to remember about the xylem. Okay, the xylem transports water up the plant. Okay. So xylem transports water, and it transports it in an upward direction. Okay? The xylem is on the inside of the stem. Okay? It is the oldest parts of the plant, okay, of the stem. So it's located, like I say, in the center of the stem or trunk. Okay? Transport is accomplished using osmosis and the polar nature of water. Okay, you have to remember that those are the processes that are going to help move the water along. So if we are looking at a leaf, okay, in terms of the layers of the leaf, okay, the way this process works is kind of as follows. The water will come up through the xylem into the veins of the leaf. Okay? As water evaporates out of the spongy layer through the stomates, the minerals that were absorbed along with it from the soil get left behind in the spongy layer, increasing the concentration of salts in the spongy layer. Okay? As a result, water naturally moves out of the veins and into the spongy layer by osmosis. Okay? So as a water molecule essentially leaves through the stomate, it creates a pulling force on the ones below it. Okay? That's because they're bonded by hydrogen bonds, cohesion, okay, and they pull on each other. In the veins and in the xylem, there's also hydrogen bonds between the water molecules and the insides of the tubes, okay, that help to keep those water molecules from falling back down. All right, so we've got osmosis creating an upward force. We've got cohesion and adhesion binding the water molecules together and to the inside of the xylem so they can't fall back down. Right? That's especially important when there isn't any evaporation going on, right? Because then there isn't any upward pulling force, and we're relying entirely on the polar nature of water to keep the column of water in the xylem supported. Okay? Everyone follow what I mean by column of water. Okay? Inside each xylem tube, there's water. Okay? That would be a column because it's vertical. Okay? Those xylem tubes have to be really, really small, because if they're not, there's too much unsupported water in the middle. Okay, the hydrogen bonds wouldn't be strong enough to hold up a column of water that's very big, okay, because they wouldn't be able to bond to the inside of the tube. There'd be a whole bunch of water in the middle that's not bonded to anything other than other water that's not bonded to anything. So they have to be really, really small. Okay, it's kind of like if you've ever used different size straws. Okay, for really, really thin straws, it's really easy to get fluid up and through them. You don't get a lot, but it's really easy to draw it up. Okay, but if you have one of those big, giant Slurpee straws, okay, you have to create a lot more suction in order to pull fluid up into one of those, because a lot of it is unsupported, okay, within the center of the tube. Now, it kind of makes sense with a Slurpee because a Slurpee is kind of partially frozen and it kind of supports itself a little bit. But if you try and just drink a liquid through one of those big straws, it's much harder to pull it up than it is through a small straw.
So with smaller plants, well, so you need the smallest tubes to keep the water in there, but if you're hit the plant with the force of that, the hydrogen bonds and all that, which is small plant,
it would maybe interrupt it a little bit, but they would reform quickly enough. It wouldn't be too big a deal. Remember that the tubes are really small. Okay, the things that can really affect the ability of the plant to support that is if air gets in there. Okay, if air gets in there, it'll disrupt the hydrogen bonds, and then you've got bubbles of air disrupting the cohesion between water molecules. We don't want that. If air gets in there, it'll really mess things up. And that'll be important for our lab tomorrow, because we have to cut a piece of the plant off and then place it in water. So we want to make sure that we have the end of it sealed. So we actually cut the plant in the sink underwater, put our thumb over the cut end, and then take it over to our lab station before putting it in our new water supply. So we want to have that end sealed for as much as possible, so we don't get air in there and we don't get anything interfering with those hydrogen bonds. Does that sort of make sense? All right, so does that process then, how that osmosis and stuff all works, Is that okay with everybody? Okay, now the opposite is true for the phloem. Okay, all these palisade cells here are carrying out photosynthesis, they're making sugar, and that sugar is going to be used by cells in the leaf for sure, but it also needs to go and supply the roots who can't make their own. So in order to do that, okay, the sugar that's produced in here will go into the phloem. That's the outer part of the vein, okay, and that will travel down through the phloem into the roots. Now, the phloem is on the outside of the tree or stem. Okay, it's not a tree, it's just a stem. Okay, it's always on the outside, so that's where all the sugary sap would be located. And if you ever get that on your fingers, okay, it's super sticky. Okay, that's the stuff that's going to be feeding the roots. Okay, every year the plant grows a new phloem on the outside. Okay, I think we talked about that yesterday, right? That's what makes the tree rings. Okay, that marks the phloem each year. Okay, so that's what happens there. Now, that means that any damage to the outside of the tree could do what? Yeah, it could kill it. Okay, it could at least interrupt the transport of sugar to certain parts of the plant. Okay, in fact, this is how you can kind of secretly kill a plant. Okay, like if somebody plants a big tree somewhere. Okay, because when I was in university, we had this nice field behind our dorm. We would go and play football and baseball and whatever when we had time. We'd go out there, big open area, and the forestry department transplanted a bunch of trees from one area into this field. And we're like, that sucks. You put all these trees here, now we can't be running. We're running into trees when we're trying to play football and baseball and whatever else. They ruined it. Well, we had a guy in our dorm who was in forestry. You know what his nickname was? Tree Mugger. That's good. Anyway, Tree Mugger knew how to get rid of these trees. Okay, so he had this little cable saw, and so just a small cable, and you pull it like this. Okay, and he said, and we're like, well, we can't cut down the trees. Like people will notice, dude. Like people are going to see if these trees fall down. He goes, oh no, we're not going to cut them down. We're just going to ring them. I'm like, okay. You're the tree mugger. And so what he did is he just went over to all the trees and he just cut into them. Maybe about this far. Okay, maybe about a centimeter. That was all. It was just enough to cut the phloem all the way around the tree. And couldn't really notice it because it was a really small cut. But it was enough that the sap wasn't getting to the roots, and the roots were starving. Okay? The trees got really, really sick. And then the forestry department fixed them. You know how? A tree skin graft. Paper mache. No word of a lie. Paper mache over the cuts. They found the cuts. Well, they didn't get caught, but they found that somebody had thrown all these trees. But what they did is they put this paper mache that they had made over the cuts, and it kind of sealed in. You know how paper mache works, right? Okay? And it just kind of filled them in. Fix the gaps in the phloem, and the trees survive, unfortunately. Okay? You can actually see the bark grow right over the course of time over the newspaper. Really, actually pretty cool, and not cool. But anyway, so the phloem carries sugar down to the roots. If it gets disrupted, then sugar doesn't reach the roots or some other part of the tree. Okay. So we talked about the xylem, okay, and we talked about this process here, so that's an explanation. There's never been a unit exam where I did not ask how that works. Okay. All right, similarly for the phloem is going to transport sugar, but it doesn't need any special forces, it just needs gravity. Gravity will do the job. Okay. Now, the process is pretty slow because phloem sap is much different than xylem sap. Xylem sap is mostly just water. Okay, it's very, very thin. It couldn't be thick, or the process of osmosis would be able to draw it up because its concentration would be too high. Okay? But in the phloem, because we're relying on gravity and it's so much sugar, the viscosity of that sap is much, much greater. Okay? And so it's very slow to go down. And in the phloem, the tubes have these things called sieve plates, okay? Which are basically like a colander almost. You know, like the thing you use to strain pasta and stuff like that, or wash fruit and vegetables in. Okay, be kind of like that, so that when the sap is going through, any big crystals, chunks that'll start to form, will get smashed against that sieve plate. Because if they get too big, what could they do? They could clog it. Okay, and that's a real problem. We don't want that to be like having an artery in your body blocked. Okay, it's called a heart attack. We don't want that. Okay, so these crystals will get crushed against the sieve plates by the weight of the sap above. Okay, and that'll keep them from getting clogged. All right, everyone okay with those ideas? All right, so the questions for review, we didn't get a chance to even start those yesterday. Okay, so I want you guys to answer those here real quick, and then we're going to move on to plant growth and development here right away. Okay, so what processes / properties are used in both intracellular transport and transport in multicellular organisms? Osmosis and diffusion. Okay, we use, a plant obviously uses osmosis to create a pulling force that draws water up, okay, but everything still has to move kind of within the layers of the leaf by diffusion as well. Okay, things still have to move around there over those small distances by diffusion. Okay, number 2, if you were tapping a maple tree to harvest sap for syrup, which transporting tissue would you be tapping? Phloem, yeah, that's where the sugar is. You wouldn't want to tap the xylem. Okay, if you put that tap in too far, all it's going to come out is watery sap. It's not going to taste very good, and I'm not putting that on my pancakes. Okay, so you want to get the phloem sap. Now, we kind of have a false impression of how that process works. Like, we see people putting a tap in a tree and like maple syrup pouring out of it. It's like drip, drip, drip. It's really, really slow. That's why maple syrup is so expensive. The real stuff. Okay, and Jemima, that's not real. Okay, real maple syrup it's a lot more expensive because it's natural food. Okay, it takes a long time to produce it. Takes a long time to to get it in there. So, okay, where is it located? It's on the outside, right? Okay, in the leaf, why are so many cells packed together near the surface of the leaf? Yeah, they got to carry out photosynthesis. What's that layer called? Palisade layer. Okay, got to make sure we know things like that. All right, how are they continually supplied with water? Yeah, by the xylem. Okay, and by the processes that we talked about. Okay, would a plant be able to transport water to its leaves more easily or less easily on a humid day? Actually, it does matter a little. Okay, the reason is that if there's a lot of water already in the air, if the humidity is close to 100%, that really means that the air has become saturated with water, and no more water, or it's more difficult for water to evaporate into the air. Obviously, it still happens, okay, but it's a bit slower if the humidity is really, really high. Okay, a plant is going to lose a lot more water on a day where the humidity is lower. Okay. Okay, you have a plant that does not look very full. It has only a few stringy branches. What could you do to give it a more full appearance? Yeah, cut it back. Trim it back. Okay, if you trim it back, it will grow replacement branches from buds that are further back on the branch, giving it a more full appearance. Okay, we talked about pruning the hedge yesterday, and that's kind of what that is. Okay, any questions on those?
Well, just the pruning the hedge thing. Don't some trees' branches not grow back? Well,
depends where. Yeah, if you cut them back too far, then yes. Okay, like an arborist who's trying to keep a tree from growing into a power line, they're going to know exactly where they need to cut that tree to keep it from growing a replacement in that direction. Sometimes that means it's like right back of the trunk. Yeah, if you do it all the way back there, yeah, it's not. Okay, we just want to make it full. We don't trim it that far back, right? Because on a mature tree, the branches get thicker the closer back. There's no buds further back. Okay, any other questions on that? All right then. Okay, then we're going to look at plant growth and development here next. Okay, so we're on lesson 13. Okay, and we're going to look at a little bit about factors that influence plant growth. We're going to look at that more another day. Okay, our big focus here is going to be the hormones and the processes that plants use to control their growth or that can affect their growth. Okay, now if we're very simply looking at things that could affect the growth of a plant, the main one would be sunlight. Sunlight is their source of energy. It's even more important than water. Okay, a well-watered plant won't live if it's in the dark. Okay, but you could have a plant survive longer in the dark. Longer, well, not watered in the sun. Okay, it would survive longer that way than it would if it was well watered in the dark. Okay, so sunlight is really important. All right, so we're going to look at a couple of things here that kind of plants do, some hormones that plants produce, okay, because plants do produce hormones, not in the same way that animals do. Okay, obviously for us, We have specialized cells within our body that produce certain types of hormones. Okay, there's tons of different hormones that our body produces, each produced by a different gland. Okay, plants don't have glands, right? Each cell in a plant produces every hormone. Okay? And those hormones have different effects on the growth of the plant. That's what we're going to look at today. Now, the other thing we need to realize is that plant shape is not fixed. Okay? There is not a genetic blueprint for a plant that says when this plant is mature, it will look like this. Okay? A plant's shape is influenced by the interactions between the plant's genetic code and the environmental conditions to which it is exposed. Right? Case in point. Back over to my tortured plants over here. Okay? These two plants, okay, this one and this one, are genetically identical. I know that because they used to be one plant. Okay? And I just cut them off and then replant them when they get too big and they fall over. Right? Now, if we look closely at these two plants, okay, we can see that they don't look very much, other than their, the shape and kind of design on their leaves, the shape of their stems is very different. Agreed? Okay, because I torture them differently. Okay, this plant, I don't torture very much. Okay, I mostly just kind of support it so that it doesn't fall down. And it grows mostly vertical. That one needs a little more support. Okay, this one, I torment. Okay, this one, I have tied to different things, and I tied it curved. You can see, like, look at this stem here. Okay, like it curves almost all the way back on itself, and then comes back up like this. Okay, you ever seen those bamboo plants that have the coil in them? That's how they do it. Okay, all they do is they just keep pinning the new growth to a tube. Okay, just kind of like this, just a piece of PVC pipe. And they just keep pinning it to the tube as it grows, and they make it grow around the tube, then they pull the tube out and sell it to you. Okay? That's how they do it. Right? Called Thigmotropism. We're going to talk about today. Okay? The shape of this plant is a combination of its reaction to its environment, okay, and its genetic code. Its genetic code says its leaves are going to look like this. Okay? Its interaction with the environment is I change where its light source is by turning it all the time. And I pin it to things to pull it in different directions and make it grow a different way. Right? As a result, it has a pretty gnarly shape. I think you would agree. It's quite gnarly. I never meant for it to get this bad, but then it just kind of got out of control and it just kept going. Okay? So that's why these two plants look so different. Okay? But they are genetically identical. They are effectively clones of each other. Okay? So a plant's genetic code does not determine its final shape like it does for an animal. Okay? For us, our genetic code says that when we are mature, we are going to have 10 fingers, 10 toes, 2 eyes, 1 nose, okay? All of that kind of stuff. It's all going to be, okay, genetically predetermined, unless you have polydactyly, okay? In which case you might have 6 fingers or 6 toes. Yeah. Have you ever heard of that? Polydactyly? Yeah. You have 6 fingers, right? So you need to buy shoes that have little sidecar. Okay.
We're just trying to tell off.
They often do, actually. Yeah. Especially if it's like, Actually, people that have polydactyly, they often have like it's not an extra pinky, it's usually one of the 2 middle ones. It's very rare. Okay, so that's what we're going to be looking at today. But guys, obviously we want to know what the plant hormones are because, there could be questions about that on the unit exam. But this is that thing that is going to be your application. Okay, hormones are going to cause this change in plant shape. Okay, so on a test, that application type question is going to be, all right, if I did this to a plant, it would grow like this because these hormones would do the following things, right? You're going to have to kind of put those ideas together when you synthesize an answer that's applying your knowledge to a certain situation. Okay. So, control of plant growth and development. Like we said, the control for a plant's shape is not entirely genetic. It's partially the genetic code, but mostly it's an interaction between that plant and environmental factors. Right? So if we're looking at this picture right here, it's kind of hard to see, but I'll draw it in. Okay, most of these trees are growing kind of straight up. What's the advantage of growing straight up? Generally, you get more sunlight and you remain pretty well balanced. Now, this tree here is growing like this. Why? A landslide, yeah. Okay, there was probably a bit of a rock slide when this tree was small that knocked it over. Okay, now if it continued to grow up like this, it would still get sunlight, wouldn't it? There's nothing around here to really shade it. Okay, it would still get sunlight, but if it kept growing out like this, eventually it would fall over. Okay, so plants actually have a bit of a sense of which way is up and down. It's important because it allows them to grow and stay balanced, but also because when they're small and they're maybe shaded, it helps direct them towards the sunlight. Sun is generally up. Okay, so relying on gravity when sun is not necessarily available, okay, or not, its direction is harder to determine, allows a plant to grow towards what will eventually be its food source. Okay? So plants can do that as well. They respond to a lot of different environmental factors. Okay, another case in point here. Oh, I got one of that plant. Okay, that plant there on the windowsill that looks sick. Okay, and this plant over here are also clones. Okay, they are genetically identical, but this one only has growth on one side. That one has fairly even growth on all sides. Anybody imagine why?
The light's like coming from the window over there, so it wouldn't do any good growing towards the wall, so it wouldn't get light.
Okay, but then shouldn't that one do the same thing? It should just grow towards the window too? Okay, maybe.
That one would get turned.
Yeah, I turn that one. Every time I water that plant, I turn it 90 degrees. This one, never turn. So this one always grows that way, because that's where its light source is. That one always gets confused, because it grows towards its light source, and then I turn it, and it has to grow toward its light source, and I turn it again. Okay? If you don't turn a plant, it'll do this. See both of these plants. They'll have one thing growing out of them, because that's the only side they ever get any sunshine on. Okay? Why would a plant bother growing anything on the side it doesn't get any sun on? Okay? You can even see this if you look in like river valleys. Okay, if you look at the plants that grow in there, they typically have one side, and it's usually the south-facing side, okay, that grows a little more than the shaded side. Okay, it's also why in Canada, at least, if you ever get lost in the woods, you can always tell which direction is north by looking at the trees. It's the side the moss will grow on, because that side is always going to be in the shade. Okay? If you didn't know that before, you're welcome. If you ever get lost in the woods, okay, moss grows on the north side of trees because that's the shaded side. Okay, so you can help you there, or you can just watch the sun come up. What's that? It's a long time to be lost. Okay, so plants obviously then have to respond to their environments. They can't pick up and move. Okay? They're stuck there. Okay, it's not the Lord of the Rings. Okay, it's not Treebeard and the Ents walking around. Okay, they have to stay put and do what they need to do in that location. Okay, making sense? Yeah. All right. So, houseplant on a windowsill, just like these ones, will grow towards the light. If you rotate the plant, it will soon reorient its growth until the leaves once again face the window. Okay? The growth of a shoot towards light is called positive phototropism. Okay? A tropism is a change in shape of a plant or a growth response of a plant. Okay? If it's phototropism, it's a growth response to light. Photo means light. Okay, so a growth response to light, okay, is phototropism. Okay, so in a forest or other natural ecosystem where plants may be crowded, phototropism directs growing seedlings toward the sunlight that powers photosynthesis. Okay, this and other types of plant growth are controlled by hormones. And we're going to look at some of those hormones here in just a minute. And you can see in that picture there, obviously the light source for those sprouts is on the left-hand side. They're orienting their growth that direction. Okay, there are 5 major classes of plant hormones, each concerned with a particular environmental stimulus. Now, looking at these little sprouts here, almost all of them are growing towards the right. Obviously, the light source is over there. What's wrong with this one? Actually, this is just a good growth response. Look how long it would have had to grow in order to get out of the shade of these ones. If it grows straight up, it's using geotropism. It's using its growth response to gravity to help direct it towards where light should be. Eventually, it'll get up above these and get into the light that way. Okay? It's just so far at the back, okay, that it can't get any of the light through all the others, so it's growing up. Okay? Okay, first plant hormone that we're going to talk about are auxins. Okay, auxins is plant growth hormone. Okay, they make the cells of a plant get longer. Okay, so they cause a lengthening of the plants. Okay, so an auxin, is responsible for elongation. That is the lengthening of a plant. Single most important function of an auxin is to stimulate elongation of cells in young, developing shoots. Okay, so it's going to work mostly in new growth. Now, auxins, like anything else, like any other growth hormone, are good in the proper amounts. Okay, but just like any hormone, too much of a good thing can also be bad. Okay, in this case here, this picture here on the left and this picture here on the right are of the same place, several weeks apart. Okay. This is the before picture, obviously. This is the after picture. Okay. These pictures are taken in Vietnam in the 60s. What was going on in the late 60s in Vietnam? The war. Okay. Now, the war was between the communist part of Vietnam, or North Vietnam, and kind of China indirectly, and the United States. The problem for the Americans in this war was they never fought in a jungle, per se. Okay, and there were a lot of problems associated with traditional warfare tactics in a jungle environment where you cannot see your adversary. And the Vietnamese army had created a vast tunnel system underneath the jungle, and they were able to kind of just pop out of nowhere, attack, and then disappear. Okay? And the Americans were getting really tired of that. So they used their technological know-how to eliminate the cover. Okay? They went to the CIA and they said, there's too many trees in Vietnam. You got to find a way to kill them all. And they're like, okay, nuclear bombs? And they're like, no, we can't use nuclear bombs. And the CIA's like, nuclear bombs? No. We kind of said no. Nuclear bombs? The CIA likes it. Okay? So they said, no, you have to find something else. We don't want to kill all the people. We just want to get the trees out of the way so we can see where all the military people are. We don't want to kill the innocent civilians. Okay. Nuclear bombs? Then they're like, okay, what about napalm? Want to blow stuff up? Come on. Napalm just sets everything on fire. They're like, no, there's that whole thing again with those innocent people that Can you find something that just kills the trees, not the people? So CIA goes out and they develop this stuff, and they start spraying it on trees, and they discover that this stuff kills trees really, really good, and it turns them this bright orange color. So they call it Agent Orange. Okay? Agent Orange. And they equip a bunch of helicopters with big tanks and spray nozzles to fly over the jungle and spray the jungle with Agent Orange. Kills the trees. Okay? Unfortunately, it had a lot of other side effects that they didn't realize at the time. Okay? It causes cancerous tumors in humans and livestock, and kills crops. It kills everything. Okay? The only thing it doesn't kill is grass. Okay, which is why we still use it today. It's Killex. It's the stuff that's in weed and feed. Okay, so in town in the summertime they have those little signs saying weeds are treated in this area. They're treated with that stuff. It doesn't kill. It only kills broadleaf plants like dandelions and thistle, but it doesn't kill grass. Okay, so you can spray the grass. Grass doesn't die, but it kills this other stuff. Okay, so anyway, they have all these helicopters, and they have like Smokey the Bear painted on them, and instead of saying only you can prevent forest fires, it says only you can prevent forests. See, this is the mindset. Okay. So anyway, they go out and they spray these. What they discover later is that what they've produced is a chemical that stimulates the production of auxins in plants. It makes them grow out of control. Okay? It just makes them grow and grow and grow so fast that they can't acquire the nutrients necessary to support the growth. They literally grow themselves to death. Okay? It's essentially cancer. Okay? For plants. Okay? And so that's what they did. They essentially just made them, they put them on steroids. Okay? They put them on steroids and produced growth that could not be supported. Okay? And we still use it for that purpose today. And that's true, guys, for any hormone. Too much of a good thing is bad. Right? The same is true for people. If you're a person who goes on steroids, you're injecting larger amounts of hormones into your body than normal. Okay? That is going to have some obviously beneficial things. Okay? If you're looking to build muscle very quickly, that is going to do it. But the problem is that your body isn't used to getting rid of the byproducts of the breakdown of those hormones in those amounts. That can be very hard on your liver. Okay? And it's going to affect negatively the glands that normally produce those hormones in your body. Okay? So back in the 80s with like Ben Johnson, Carl Lewis, and all those like sprinters, Jonas Griffith Joyner, okay? They were all, into the roids. Okay? And they just got like massively strong and massively fast. Okay? But the problem is that there was some other side effects that they didn't consider. Okay? For a man, if you're injecting large amounts of testosterone into your body, you're going to have the effects of testosterone but amplified. So you're going to develop larger muscles. Okay? Your voice is going to get deeper. You're going to grow more hair. Same thing that testosterone normally does. Okay? But just amplified. The other problem, though, is that the glands in your body that normally produce testosterone stop producing it because they don't need to. You're constantly supplying it. What happens to things when you don't use them? They atrophy. Think about it. They shrink. Think about it. And think about what glands produce testosterone. They shrink. Okay? In very severe cases, they don't come back. They just, you can become infertile. Okay? There's other problems. Okay? It's bad. So you got all these muscles to carry around, and you've got other problems. So the other issue is that women were taking the testosterone as a steroid in order to develop the large muscles and strength, okay, that they were looking for. Well, testosterone causes the development of secondary male characteristics. It's a male hormone. In large amounts in a woman, that's going to mean bigger muscles, more hair, deep voice, being quite mannish. Okay, man-ish. Okay, just like at some point, if you get a chance, we don't have time to do it today, but at some time, look at the 1980 Olympic East German women's swimming team. Okay? Yeah. Okay. The old Soviet Union had this, we all know that the Soviets had like a massive steroid program. Okay? Look at some of their athletes from the early 80s. It's hard to tell them apart. They just, like big jaws and massive muscles. Okay, so, auxins are a growth hormone that in large amounts can kill a plant. Okay? In proper amounts, they are actually incredibly important for the plant to grow and to cause tropisms. Okay? To cause these changes in shape that are caused by gravity and sunlight and touch. Okay? So the way that those plants over there have started making those changes is by secreting auxins to one side of the plant more than the other. Okay? And what that does, if I have a plant that's growing straight up, but then starts to secrete a lot more hormones to this side than from this side will grow faster. And it'll bend. Okay? Same thing here. If it starts to do this, the only way it can do that is by secreting a lot more auxin on this side to make those cells grow faster than the ones on this side, pushing it back the other way.
So are they allowed to like spray auxins everywhere? It's hard to tell.
In the amount, that's why they have to post those signs, actually. They have to say, we applied herbicide here, and for 24 hours or 48 hours, you kind of need to stay off it. Okay? Because it isn't good for you. Okay? I used to work at a golf course, and my job was, I was the sprayer. Okay? I had to wear like the mask and the paper suit and the whole works to keep the stuff off my skin, to keep from inhaling it, because it's really not good for you. Okay, that making sense? Okay, auxins are also important in the pollination of plants. Well, the fake pollination, rather, of plants. Okay, how many people have eaten seedless fruit before? Guys, we all do, right? Because it's convenient, so you don't have to worry about seeds. Okay, the way to get seedless fruit is to trick a plant into thinking it's been pollinated or fertilized. Okay, so for plants, in case you didn't know, okay, the pollination process is how sperm from one plant gets to the egg of another. Okay, pollen grains contain plant sperm. All right, so when pollen blows through the air, it lands on the flower of another plant. That's the reproductive process for plants. Okay, you can trick a plant into thinking it's been fertilized by putting very dilute amounts of auxin onto the flowers. Okay, it'll start the same chemical process that pollen would start if it landed there. Okay, the difference is there's no pollen, there's no sperm. So then there's no fertilization, and there's not going to be any seed. But the process that develops the fruit still occurs. So you get this big fruit that normally encompasses and protects the seed, but there's no seed inside. Okay, that's how they make seedless fruit.
So seeds on strawberries on the outside, right?
Yes.
So what happened if you give a strawberry on the outside?
Like on the blossom?
Yeah, so like there's no seeds in the
Then
strawberries.
you would maybe not get any seeds on the outside of the strawberries. It doesn't work for all fruit, but most seedless fruit.
Raspberry.
Yeah.
But after the actual food,
No, the seeds are inside the berry. Yeah. So it's like you got the the kind of bulbous red part, right? Inside of that is where the seed is.
Oh, and also do auxins work on the seeds themselves?
No. 'Cause it has to be absorbed. So for an auxin to work, it has to be absorbed through the stomach. It's a big thing. Okay. So auxins help with elongation. That's what we need to remember. They're a growth hormone. They make plants get longer. Okay. Okay. Growth cytokinins. Okay. Cytokinins cause cytokinesis. Okay. That is cell division. Right. They cause cells to divide. Okay. As cells divide, the plant can replace any old, diseased, damaged, dying cells, which is why plants often have, okay, if we're talking about certain plants, not all plants, but some plants have very long lifespans. Okay, oldest organism on Earth, okay, is a tree that grows in Northern California. It's called the Methuselah tree. Okay, Methuselah was the guy in the Bible who lived to be like 1,000 years old or whatever. Okay. So yeah, it's called the Methuselah tree. It is, I want to say like 8,000 years old or something like that. It's really, really old. Okay, its location is kept a secret because they don't want people to go out there. Okay, now cytokinins basically allow a plant to continually replace cells that are no longer functioning. What eventually gets an animal, okay, is that its cells just start breaking down. They can't continue to divide error-free. Okay, so the more times the cell divides in your body, okay, the less efficient it gets at it. So eventually we age. Okay, our cells stop doing that process correctly, and things start to fail. Cytokinins effectively keep that process at bay by replacing those cells. Okay, so obviously as soon as medical science discovers this, they immediately think, okay, if we put that kind of thing into animals, then animals will replace dying cells because their cells will divide and keep doing that. What's uncontrolled cell division called? Cancer. Yeah, that's exactly what it would cause. It doesn't work in humans. Okay, it's not the same kind of process. Okay, so cytokinins. Okay, cytokinins cause cytokinesis or cell division. Okay, they effectively slow down the aging process. Gibberellins. Gibberellins work a lot like auxins. They help with elongation, but they work in different areas, not just in the new growth of a plant, but they can actually work in some of the older growth areas as well, and they can have an influence on the amount of blossoms and fruit that can be formed okay, on a plant. All right, so gibberellins, okay, roots and young leaves are the major sites where that's produced, but they stimulate growth in both the leaves and the stem. They don't have much effect on root growth, even though they can be produced there. So in the stems, gibberellins stimulate cell elongation and cell division. So what we see here, okay, is two different varieties of rice. Okay, so these would be rice. These would be normal rice plants. These rice plants, if you look, okay, at the stalks on these ones on the left are a lot thicker than the stalks of these rice plants. Okay, the rice plants on the right have what's called foolish seedling disease. Okay, foolish seedling disease is caused by a fungus that grows on the roots of the rice plant, and it stimulates an overproduction of gibberellins. Gibberellins will help the cells to get longer, but they won't help with any girth. Okay, they won't make the stem get wider. Right? If you grow really tall and you don't get wider to support that, eventually the rice plants just fall over. Foolish seedlings grow too fast and they fall over, okay, and they die. Okay? Whereas normal rice plants would have both primary, that's upward growth, and secondary growth happening at the same time. All right, questions on gibberellins? Okay, they're kind of the least important of all of them. They just kind of do both. They're kind of a mixture of both auxins and cytokinins. All right, abscisic acid. Okay, abscisic acid is technically a hormone that plants produce, but it helps with the slowing of growth. It actually signals a plant to go dormant. So plants here in Canada have kind of finished producing it. It's what causes them to go dormant. Basically, it interrupts the production of chlorophyll. Maybe we actually will write that down. Okay, so abscisic acid, okay, interrupts. That's 2 R's. Interrupts, okay, the production of chlorophyll. Okay, by doing this, okay, the plant stops carrying out. Yeah, almost all of its photosynthesis stops. There's still some pigments that are present in the leaves. Those are the ones we see in the fall. Okay, but if photosynthesis stops, then water doesn't have to move either, which is why the leaves turn color, get dry, and fall off the tree. Why does a tree want to do that? So it doesn't freeze. Okay? If we stop the photosynthesis, we stop the movement of water. Okay? And essentially the xylem tubes empty, which is important through the winter. We don't want water in the middle of the tree in those tubes, because what does water do when it freezes? It expands to shatter the trees. Okay? It'll break their xylem tubes, okay? And that will kill them. So this process of going dormant is caused by this acid being produced. Okay? It disrupts the production of chlorophyll, slows photosynthesis, stops the movement of water, and prepares a plant for dormancy. It's like winterizing a trailer, exactly. Okay? If you winterize by blowing out your lines as opposed to pumping full of antifreeze. Yes, exactly the same way.
Antifreeze.
There's
I don't know.
not in the plant. No. Don't feed a plant antifreeze. Okay. All right. So what you see in this picture here is actually a study of the dosage of abscisic acid. Okay. These plants here in the back with all the big blossoms on them and everything, they've got basically no abscisic acid in them, and then each successive level here has more and more abscisic acid. You can see these ones here are basically dormant. Okay, or dead. Okay, whereas these other ones their growth is slowing. Okay, the more abscisic acid there is, the slower the growth, the slower the photosynthesis. Okay, so basically it actually slows down the growth of a plant and helps it to assume a dormant state. Okay, in the desert, this actually happens in the summertime. Okay, plants go dormant in the summer in the desert because it's too hot. Okay, now how does a plant know when to produce this? Yes, sunlight levels. Okay? They can't go by temperature. Right? Sometimes we get a cold snap for a few days, or snow, okay? And we're not supposed to. If a plant went by temperature, it would get false positives on when to start producing this stuff. But day length is incredibly reliable. So once the days start to get towards where they're equal amounts of light and dark, then the plant starts producing this because it knows the days are getting shorter. Okay? In the springtime, it's a bit more about temperature. As it starts to warm and the days are getting longer, then the plant will start to kind of wake up. Questions on abscisic acid?
So if you like take a tree from the desert and like plant it here, so the summer would like try to start losing its leaves and stuff because it's like the daylight's getting longer.
No, if we took a tree from the desert here, it would have a bit more trouble because day length is different, right? Like if I go down to Arizona, the longest day in Arizona is only going to be maybe 14 or 15 hours. Okay, the length of day difference is amplified the further away from the equator you get. Okay, I mean here where we are, our longest day is, I think we get on the longest day it's like 18 and a half hours of sunshine and only 5.5 hours of darkness. You go further north to the Arctic Circle, the sun doesn't set for a month and a half. Right? If you're a kid, it's awesome. Your parents let you come home at dark. Awesome. Okay? But it's different. Okay? You go to the equator, and they hardly notice the difference. Okay? In fact, I remember being in Hawaii one time, and this lady at the desk was complaining about how short the days were getting. And it was August. And I'm like, what do you mean the days are getting shorter? Like, the day length doesn't change very much here. She's like, yeah, but like the days now, it's only like 12 and a half hours of daylight. So I'm like, what? Come up to Canada on December 21st and tell me that. Okay, when there's 5 hours of sunlight. Okay, the sun comes up at 10 o'clock in the morning, and by the time I go home at 3:30, it's dark already. Okay, then complain.
I have a question about when the plant is growing, does it only one dose to grow, or does it get continuous dose to grow?
It would continue producing until the chlorophyll production basically stops.
Okay, so once it goes, so once the chlorophyll production is done, there's no more.
There won't be any more abscisic acid.
Okay, so
It'll produce in the springtime the production of the other hormones.
okay, so how does the acid?
Okay, now ethylene. Ethylene is a gas that is produced by different parts of the plant, especially the sepals, which are the little leaves at the base of a flower. Okay, they produce a gas called ethylene. Ethylene causes the ripening of fruit, and it also can cause the natural senescence, dormancy, and death of the parent plant that has produced the fruit. Okay. So, if you've ever noticed this, bananas get ripe really quickly. Okay? Bananas produce more ethylene gas than any other fruit. Okay? So you don't want to have them around other fruits because they will cause them to rot quickly as well. Okay? You want to keep bananas away from other fruits. Okay? All fruits produce ethylene in small amounts, but bananas are the worst. Okay? If your parents grow tomatoes. Okay, like around here, you have to pick tomatoes before they're ready, right? Otherwise they'll get frozen. Okay, so we pick them when they're green because we have a short growing season. If you want them to get red quickly, where do you put them? In a box. Yeah. Okay. Don't put them with bananas. They'll be rough right away. Okay. Put them in a box, and it traps the ethylene gas that they produce. Okay, and it'll help them to ripen faster. You want to ripen a little bit faster than that? Put a couple apples in there. Okay, with the tomatoes. Apples produce a little more ethylene. Don't put bananas in, okay? You won't be able to keep up, right? But if you put something else in there, you put them in a box, the ethylene gas gets trapped in there and helps to ripen. I don't know if you guys have seen this, but sometimes on TV they advertise these green bags that help keep like fruit and produce fresh for longer. Okay? They call them green bags because they were green. They had this coating on the inside that actually absorbed ethylene gas. Right? So as ethylene gas would be produced, it would be trapped in the bag by this material, and the stuff inside would stay good for weeks.
For orders that are shipped over, do they do anything with this, or is it just the freezing out?
They would probably have pretty good air circulation, or they would pick it incredibly early, like bananas, right? I don't know if you guys probably don't do a lot of grocery shopping, but it seems like every time I need to get bananas, the bananas are either already turning brown or they're green. Okay? There's never a perfect time for bananas, which is where the banana principle comes from. Okay? The banana principle is this. It's Murphy's Law applied to bananas. If you buy bananas green, you will eat them before they are ready. If you buy them ripe, they will be brown before you eat them. True. That's the banana principle. Pessimistic, but true. Okay, so ethylene gas basically just helps with the ripening of fruit, and the presence of ethylene gas can help trigger the production of abscisic acid. okay, which will then lead to dormancy. Why does a plant want this to trigger the other? Because once it's produced fruit, it's done. Okay? That usually takes most of the growing season, or if it's an annual, it's only going to do it once and then it's going to die. Okay? So it'll signal that production of other things to get the plant to develop. Cool.
It's kind of fast. I was going to say, but when you put bananas with avocados, they have avocados right first.
Why don't they?
Well, they do.
They do, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, all things do.
Yeah.
Well, avocados do.
They take soul, right?
Avocados do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they have that thick, remember, they have that thick, leathery skin.
So you put them with that, they're perfect.
They'd be perfect, okay? I'll let you try. Yeah, they fuel each other, yeah. Okay. But again, like an avocado's got that very leathery skin, right? It'd probably be the same for like a honeydew or a cantaloupe, like they would, because they have a tight seal. They're not gonna. Okay, now the growth patterns here.
Some northern plants with like freezes,
Yeah.
and they can stay green, and as soon as the frost goes away, they can start producing.
Yes. Those plants are usually adapted, but they have in their xylem sap chemicals that act basically in antifreeze. Yeah, and they can survive that a little better. Okay, so tropisms, as we said before, are growth responses, and they result in curvatures of whole plant organs. Okay, either toward a stimulus or away from it, depending on what we're talking about. Okay, so this plant here is growing in response to gravity. Okay, if this plant, because I tipped it over, just kept growing out this way, it would still get light, wouldn't it? Okay, it's inside, it would still get light. It doesn't need to grow upwards to get light. Okay, but it does need to grow upwards in order to stay balanced. If it grows out this way, it's going to fall down. Okay, so it will naturally grow, okay, due to the pull of gravity. It knows which direction is up and which direction is down. Okay, now the way that this happens, okay, so the mechanism for all tropisms, and this is something that you'll definitely want to write when you're dealing with a question about tropisms. Okay, the mechanism by which this happens is the differential rate of growth of cells on either side. Okay, if you recall, I was saying in order for this to happen, there needs to be more auxins on this side of the stem than on the other side. Okay, that means this side will grow faster and bend the plant in that direction. Okay, everybody all right with that? Okay, so auxins are the plant hormone most involved in tropisms. Okay, so if you want to just write auxins most responsible. Okay, so the three stimuli. We talked about phototropism already. Okay, phototropism is growth response to light. We'll go over it again, but geotropism is a growth response to gravity. Okay, geo meaning earth. Earth is the source of gravity. Okay, for us anyway. Okay, and so there is a growth response to the mass of the earth. Okay, geotropism will make a plant grow up or down opposite gravity. Okay, it doesn't grow towards gravity because then it will grow downwards. Okay, so it grows away from it. Okay, if you grow a plant in zero gravity, it grows just towards the light. Okay, because that's all it needs to do. It doesn't have a sense of oxygen.
If it's in zero gravity, how does this happen?
This would have it naturally move there by diffusion. Right? There would be some diffusive force there. Okay. So phototropism, okay, caused by the location of light sources. And again, you can see here, okay, in this diagram, we're seeing that on one side of the plant, okay, we've got longer cells. These ones are growing faster. These cells are much shorter. Okay, they're not growing as fast. That's going to cause the bending of the plant towards or away, depending on which growth we're talking about. Okay, this towards or away from the stimulus. Okay, and the last one is thigmotropism, and that's what I've been doing to those plants there, right? I've been tying them onto things and making them turn, okay, changing their growth, not letting them grow a certain way by tying them and making them go a different direction. Okay, so thigmotropism is growth response to touch. Okay, anything that climbs uses thigmotropism. All right, so have you ever seen ivy growing on the side of a building? Okay, if you have like a honeysuckle or sweet peas or something like that that grow in your yard, they use thigmotropism. Okay, if you grow peas in your garden, you usually have to put a fence for them to climb. Okay, they put these little vines or tendrils around stuff they can grab on, hold on, and then they can grow upwards more quickly because they don't have to make big stems to support their weight. They've got lots of individual little vines that are holding on for them. Okay, some plants even go a step further, ivy included, okay, in that they secrete chemicals that will dissolve the substrate around them and allow them to get like a handhold into a solid object. In fact, these plants will do that. I found that out the hard way. Everywhere where there's a kind of change in the branch, you can see there's kind of a brown nodule. Okay? When these make contact with things, they can actually secrete a chemical that will dissolve it, particularly drywall. Okay? And they'll grow through or into the drywall. Okay? And that can be bad. Okay? And that happened because when I moved, I picked it up, I had it growing on top of my cupboards, and I stepped off and I pulled up a chunk of drywall. The plant had grown into the drywall. Okay? So yeah, ivy will do the same thing. It dissolves the bricks, okay, and all old buildings and gets its handhold in. Okay? All right, making sense. Okay, how am I going to ask a question about the tropisms? I'll probably show you a picture. Okay, I put a picture on a test and say, here's a picture of a plant that looks like this. Here's the situation it's in. Tell me why it looks like that. Okay, if it's something growing up the side of a building, then you talk about how, in order to make these vines grow like this, you'd have auxins going to one side, probably to wrap around and grow in a curvature. Okay, things like that. Being able to explain that process. That sort of make sense? Yes. All right, I want you guys to answer those questions, and then we'll go through them. Okay, let's just quickly talk about the answers to these here, guys. So why is it important that two identical plants grown from clippings of the same plant may grow up to look entirely different? Yeah, it's their environment. Remember, a plant's shape is determined not just by its genetics, but also by its environment. Okay? A growth pattern is a tropism. Okay. Do plants in the tropical rainforest require very much abscisic acid? If you go dormant in the rainforest, you're dead. Okay? You need to grow all the time. Okay, number 4, long exposure to 2,4-D, which is an auxin. That's Agent Orange. Okay, 2,4-D. Okay, that's the abbreviation for it. It's a much longer name. Okay, has been shown to produce cancerous tumors in humans because it causes what? Increased growth. Yeah. Okay, increased cellular growth. And this hormone is involved in the ripening of fruit. Ethylene. Tomorrow's quiz, another cell diagram. Okay, I will post it later on today. You will have another cell to label tomorrow. It might not be another plant cell, since you had a plant cell the last time. Okay.